Welcome to Bourbon Barry's Whiskey Lounge. This is my first YouTube video, and I wanted to start off kind of going back to my roots. And I want to let you know that I am no expert. I'm just a regular guy like you, but I know a little bit about whiskey. And just like you, I at times have been chasing, some of the rarer allocated bottles. But I wanted to go back to my beginnings, and I wanted to look at today the category of budget bourbons. Now, I'm in suburban New York. So budget bourbons in New York are a little bit different as far as price point, let's say, from maybe other parts of the country. So I'm going to set this value at like $30 or less. And I know we can make an argument that maybe budget should be under 20, but just hard to find in my area, hard to find a lot of bottles for that price point. So for me in New York, it's going to be $30 or less. But if you're in other parts of the country, you might actually be able to find these bottles for less. And I think that, this whole idea of lower shelf, bottom shelf bottles, these bottles can get kind of overlooked, but there's a lot of good stuff out there, I think, that has value, has a lot of flavor. And I think if you stock your bar with the 5 bottles that I'm going to talk about today, you're going to have a nice selection. It's going to be tasty, whether you sip them neat, put them on ice over a cocktail, and you'd be more than happy to share these with friends. So let's get started. I think I'm going to go in descending order. So we'll start with the most expensive ones first, and we'll work our way down. So I don't think any conversation about bottles, budget bottles, would be complete unless you talked about Buffalo Trace. Now, I started off by saying that we're not going to talk about allocated bottles. And depending on the part of the country that you're in, this bottle is somewhat allocated. In my area, it's readily available. It's marked up some. I typically can find it for somewhere between $30 to $35, but for MSRP, this is going to come in at under $30, and that's why I include this one on the list. If you can't find it, we've got some other alternatives here too. But Buffalo Trace's flagship bottle, I think it's really tasty. I know that there are opinions about this, and you're certainly entitled to your opinion, whether you like it or not, but this is just the world according to me. But happen to think let's say for that $30-ish price point, I think this is really a good bottle. I think that when I have friends over who don't know anything about bourbon and we do tastings, they tend to like this, even if I do them blind and they don't know what they're tasting. I think that this seems to be real popular for, let's say, maybe more novices, but also for people that are more experienced consumers as well. So it comes in at 90 proof. To me, this has, and one of the reasons that I personally like is I think it's got all of the prototypical flavors that you're really looking for in a bourbon. It has caramel, it's got some oak, and it's got some vanilla. And I think those three, the whole holy trinity of flavors, are things that are expressed really well in Buffalo Trace. 90 proof, it's not going to blow your glasses off with alcohol. But it's got those three, I think, flavors that are really balanced. I think it tastes great. Again, you want to put it over ice, you want to sip it neat. I think that this could do well in a cocktail. I don't typically use it as my cocktail bourbon, but I think that this is a real good one. And I think that if you can find it at a real reasonable price, I think you might like this one too. So that's the first bottle. Second bottle at around the same price point, but again, now it's not allocated, but not as easy to find in New York, but easier to find in other parts of the country, is this one. And this is Cooper's Craft. Sorry for the reverse screens. I'll have to figure out how to reverse my image on using my camera here. But for now, you'll just have to read it backwards. Cooper's Craft is a Brown-Forman product. And they use this innovative chiseling process on the inside of their barrels that increases the whiskey's exposure to wood. And I'll tell you, I happen to like everything that comes out of Brown-Forman, whether it's Woodford Reserve or any of the Old Forester products. But this is not double-barreled, but I think it's reminiscent of, let's say, maybe some more expensive double-barrel products like Old Forester 1910 or Woodford Double Oak. But it's not double oak. I just want to make that point. But this has a lot of flavor, and it's got like an oak flavor, but it's not necessarily a bitter oak. I think it's more of a sweet oak. It's got caramel. It's got real typical bourbon flavors. I think it's probably, if you're going to, let's say, match this up against the Buffalo Trace, I think it's probably even got maybe more intensity of flavor. And at $30 or plus or minus, again, depending where you are, I think this is a winner. So if you can grab a bottle of this, give this a try. And again, this is something that, at 100 proof, again, is great as a sipper, great in a cocktail, and I think it's a really good product. Now, coming down in price just a little bit, in let's say the $25 to $30 range, this is one of the first bottles actually that I got as I started my bourbon journey, and it's Larceny Small Batch, and this is a Heaven Hill product. It is a wheated bourbon, and it kind of got me really liking wheated bourbons. So they replace the rye and the mash bill with wheat, and that gives it a softer. Smells great. It gives you that baking spice, softer taste, and somewhat of a sweeter aroma. And this is another one that I think for, let's say, friends that come over that maybe they're interested in your bourbon habit. You may want hobby, bourbon hobby. This is one I think that's great to share with, let's say, maybe people that don't know much about whiskey, and as well as people that like whiskey. I think that it's got a lot of flavor. It's a wheated bourbon. I don't happen to have a bottle here now, but certainly Maker's Mark would fall into that same category. I like Maker's Mark. If I had to pick, you kind of getting a little bit higher out of that. And the reason I didn't pull it up here is because it's a little bit more expensive in my area, about $35. But between Maker's Mark and Maker's 46, I probably personally would give the nod to 46 because I think that what they do with the French oak staves gives it a little bit more of that sweet oak flavor and makes it a little bit more, let's say, interesting than the standard issue Maker's Mark. But Larceny, I've matched this up blind, and it has over several different tastings, has consistently beaten Weller Special Reserve, which I have up there somewhere. Which again, MSRP at $30. If you can get Weller Special Reserve at $30, I think you could add this to the list, but certainly more allocated than, let's say, Buffalo Trace. But it matches up really well in taste profile. In fact, if anything, I think that this has more flavor. It's more interesting than Weller Special Reserve. So if you can't find Weller Special Reserve, give Larceny Small Batch a try. I think you'll like it. The next one, and this is one of my favorites, the Cooper's Craft too, I suppose, but this one is really one of my favorites for a lot of reasons. It comes in a liter bottle, so we're comparing apples to oranges here, but this is $25 in my area. This is Early Times Bottled in Bond, and this comes in at $25 for a full liter, so you can do the math and figure out, compare it to some of these other bottles, that it's a good value. And I think that the flavors on this are excellent. There's a few honorable mentions that I'll pull up here at the end, but I think Early Times Bottled in Bond does not taste like a cheap, let's say, budget bourbon. It's got delicious flavors. It's got full flavors, 100 proof, again, a little bit higher proof, so it's not watery. I think it's just absolutely delicious. It's got a sweeter profile, which I tend to prefer, so it's a little bit sweeter in the vanillas and the caramels, but it's great. It's relatively inexpensive. It's pretty easy to find. Actually, a local liquor store in our area just started stocking it. So relatively easy to find. And I think that if you haven't tried this, or like you walk by it and, again, it's sitting on the lower shelf and you make a face, give it a shot, because I think you'd be pretty surprised at how delicious it is. And then the last one of this 5, which I got for $13. It's hard to find in New York, but a friend brought it back from Kentucky. Got it at a liquor barn in Louisville. It's very old Barton. So, Barton Distilleries, it's similar distillate that you would get, let's say, in the 1792 products, which I also think are really good. But for $13, this one happens to be the 86 proof version. It's the only one I could find. Looking for the 100 proof one, but for $13, this is not a crappy bourbon. It does not have the pop of flavor that, let's say, the Cooper's Craft or the Early Times has, or any of the others, but it's tasty. Primarily, and you're not going to get, let's say, maybe that holy trinity so much of the caramel and the vanilla and oak, but you're definitely going to get the sweetness, and you're going to definitely get a little bit of oak on this too. But what it has are good flavors, and I think there are some other, let's say, maybe lower end bourbons that can have some off-putting flavors. This doesn't have that. Everything that it has is delicious. Again, it's not the strongest. I don't think this would be a good cocktail choice because I think it's just a little bit too low in proof, but happen to think it's really good. I have a bottle hopefully coming soon of 100. I'll do a video on that too. But you don't overlook this. And I happen to think it's a real sexy bottle too. But don't overlook Very Old Barton. Good flavors, something that you could just pour up again, and sip. Not worry about breaking the bank. And I think this one's a really good one as well. All right, so I've got 2 more to add into this list, and I think if I didn't add these in, I'd get a lot of hate mail. The first one is Wild Turkey 101. 101 proof wild turkey product. I haven't yet met a wild turkey product that I didn't like. It's got a little bit of a different taste profile. It doesn't have as much. It's not, to me, at least on my palate, it doesn't have the sweet caramel vanilla. It's more of sort of like a toffee, but not as sweet, more of a spicy flavor, but it's really good. This is a little half bottle, but you can get a full, you can get a handle for, probably about 20-25 bucks. And great in a cocktail. You could pour this up and sip it neat and put it over ice. And this is a winner. And you could find this everywhere. So that's certainly another good one. And another one, this happens to be, for whatever reason, my go-to cocktail bottle is Old Granddad Bonded. And you could substitute the 114 if you prefer. It's a little bit harder for me to find the 114 in my area. Having said that, I blind tasted them, and I actually prefer the 100 proof, at least sipping it neat, over the 114. I think the 114 has more ethanol, but doesn't necessarily have a lot more flavor. But this is really tasty. It's got good complex flavors. It's another one. I don't think it's watery, at 100 proof. But this is another one that you could find, certainly in the metropolitan New York area. You can find pretty much everywhere. And this is another one I think to grab and put up on the shelf. Do I grab it every day as a daily sipper? I don't. Not that I couldn't, I suppose, but maybe I just, like, for example, like if I matched it up against the Cooper's Craft, maybe that's not a fair fight. But I just think maybe the Cooper's Craft is a little bit more interesting, drinking it alone. But as a cocktail, I think this is a really, really good one too. And then there's one more that I'm going to mention, and I mention this all the time, and I think this is a little bit different. This is really cheap. You can get this for under 15 bucks. This is Benchmark number 8. I know this round bottle, supposedly in certain, or the cylindrical bottle, in certain parts of the country, it freaks people out that no one's seen it, but this is a glass bottle. It's also 1 liter. Maybe the 1 liter is maybe between $15 and $20. So now number 8, 80 proof. This one's a little bit on the thin side. Not that, again, everything it has is good, but if you match this up against the Very Old Barton, I think the Very Old Barton has a lot more going for it. But having said that, this is something that I always have around, because I think this, when someone comes in and says, hey, I've never had bourbon before, I want to try it, this is probably a good one. I mean, Basil Hayden's too, but I just think, like, for what it is, I think it's kind of got a similar profile, but it's a lot more expensive. But this one I think is good to have around for folks that maybe want to give a sip, just to see if they like bourbon. I do not see in my area some of the other products, like the Full Proof, which again, I've read is incredibly good. Matches up against some really more expensive stuff, or let's say the Single Barrel. Not those are things that are not available in my area. I can go into New Jersey and pick them up at a Total Wine, but I think any of the Benchmark products, probably other than this one, would probably have more flavor. But it's not that it's bad. Again, it's a little bit weak, maybe a little bit diluted. But again, I always have it around just for those people who say they want to try whiskey. And for folks who have never had whiskey before, this is 80 proof is still it's 40% alcohol, so there's still a lot there. So there's a bunch. I think, any one of these are excellent products from excellent distilleries, well made, and I think any one of them, you could. So those are 7. You could have a bar with those 7 and never have to worry about winning a raffle or camping out or paying secondary prices. With the exception of the Buffalo Trace, which some areas is a little bit harder to find than others, but if you can't find the Buffalo Trace, I think a lot of these other ones could be good options. So there you go. So there's my first YouTube. Let me know in the comments other things that you'd like to see. I think there's a lot of other budget bourbons. There's tons out there. I mean, this is only so much space on the shelf, but there's a lot of other budget bourbons that we could talk about. And then maybe for the next one, maybe we'll go up and we'll look at maybe, like, let's say bottles, let's say around $50, and pick some of those too. But in the comments, let me know if there's things that you think I've missed in this budget category, you think that I should go out and try. Drop a comment. I'll go out and give them a taste, and we can do another video on it. But I hope you've enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.